Bull at lunchtime, so you'll stay awake. Everyone will sit, and we have a great shorter session coming here with two speakers, with Reggie, who is actually, this is very exciting. Reggie works for the Journal of Design History, and you can read this as well, and teaches at UPenn, but she is actually just about to move to England to head up to the, let me get this right, the Department of Business History?
No, I'll be a professor of business history, but working with the Marks and Spencer Corporate Archives.
Wow, that sounds big. All right, so Reggie, everyone.
Thank you for having me, Nicholas, to this talk. I'm really glad to be back here at the Smithsonian. I started my career here at the Smithsonian way back in 1978 as what is fondly known in some circles as a baby curator, and spent 11 years at the National Museum of American History before getting my PhD. So I got my PhD when I just turned 40, so that's how I fit into the theme of the of the conference. So, but it's really great to be back here and to share some of my new research. I'm going to talk today about Dorothy Lebus, who is one of the most prominent weavers, handloom weavers in 20th century America. I know that some people in the audience have published books and have mentioned her or discussed her in their books and so on and so forth. I take a slightly different perspective. I'm a historian of innovation, and I focus on design and product development as processes. In looking at the exhibit the other day, 40 Under 40, I noticed a label that Nicholas had written which said, although the crafted object traditionally has been celebrated, its presence is no longer necessary. Increasingly, makers are asking us to acknowledge process itself as the point of craft. So I think that's kind of a nice tie-in to my work as a business historian, which focuses on the design process. I think this approach is particularly prescient today and relevant to the conference theme of craft because it allows us to look behind closed doors and study how creativity worked during the so-called golden age of American big business, which ran from 1945 to 1970. The case study that I'm going to give focuses on Dorothy Lebus and her relationship to the Dupont company. The case study really represents a world that no longer exists. DuPont, for Dorothy Lebus is dead. She died in 1972. And the DuPont company, E.I. DuPont, Dana Morris and Company, sold the majority of its fibers business in 2004. So DuPont is no longer, although it was the big gorilla on the block with fibers in the post-war years, it is no longer largely in the fibers business. It still makes a few fibers here and there and is experimenting with green fibers, but it's no longer in the fiber business. So the story that I'm going to talk about really is it's about a world that doesn't exist, but I think that the story that I'm going to tell really shows the relevance of craft and the relationship between craft and corporations and can perhaps provide some guidance for us in the future. Dorothy Lebus lived from 1899 to 1972. She was based first in San Francisco and later in New York City, where her textile design consultancy, Dorothy Lebus Studios, served major clients in the fibers, fabrics, and fashion industries. Her clients included Bigelow Sanford Carpet, the De Beckman Company, Dow Chemical, Johnston Knitting, as in the bathing suit company, Jasco Fabrics, and Sears Roebuck and Company, and DuPont. From 1955 to 1971, her most important client was DuPont. She earned between $9,000 and $18,000 annually from her DuPont association. Now, DuPont is still an important company. It's still a blue chip company that's important to the American economy. But really, in the post-war years, in those years 1955 to 1971, DuPont was really sitting on top of the world, as was the U.S. Chemical industry. In 1962, the United States produced 45% of the chemicals made in the world. By comparison, in 2008, the U.S. produced only 18% of the chemical output produced in the world. So you see a vast shift coming from the era of post-war hegemony, when American industry was really the only thing left standing after World War II, until our own time, the global era, when production is often very closely linked to markets. DuPont was also in this period in 1962. It was the dominant player in the American chemical industry. The U.S. chemical industry in 1962 made $19 billion worth of products, and DuPont produced 2.5 billion of those products. It didn't produce the majority of those products, but it was the dominant firm. Here we have a famous mural that was produced by the DuPont company by an artist named John McCoy for the New York World's Fair in 1939, which shows the apotheosis of chemistry. And I show it because I think it tells us about a world that we've lost. It tells us about an approach that, in fact, often seems alien to us. Today, we don't necessarily celebrate the achievements of chemistry. Sometimes we're critical of the achievements of chemistry. But in this propaganda piece, you see the apotheosis of chemistry, and you see how chemistry is depicted as an engine of change, transforming an agricultural nation into a modern post-war world where everyone is presumably happy and so on and so forth. So there's a bit of mythology going on there. DuPont was most famous. DuPont started off as a black powder maker in the early 19th century in the Wilmington, Delaware area, and it diversified into other products in the first decades of the 20th century. That story has been told, and I'm happy to talk to people about sources of that story if they're interested. But I'm going to focus on Dupont Fibers today. DuPont introduced Nylon 6,6, the world's first synthetic fiber, at the New York World's Fair in 1939, and here at the Golden Gate Exposition in San Francisco in 1939. Previously, DuPont had made rayon. That rayon went into ladies' stockings and ladies' dresses. It was a proto-synthetic fiber. It's really called a man-made fiber by textile scholars, and you can see here some stockings, some early DuPont stockings made from rayon. Rayon was a substitute for silk hosiery, a material that became cut off. The supplies of silk got cut off as tensions rose in the Pacific in the late 1930s. But DuPont understood that if it could create a fiber that was as good as silk, it would be able to push rayon out of the business, and it would really have a good product that would appeal to consumers on a fashion basis. So DuPont made a lot of money during World War I, making munitions, and beginning in the 1920s, it channeled those profits into chemical engineering and into scientific chemical research. And those two initiatives together allowed the company to produce this miracle material, this new product. So by the late 1950s, by the mid-1950s, DuPont was the preeminent fiber maker in the world and in America. And it had a family of fibers. It produced nylon, Dacron polyester, which it licensed from the British firm ICI, produced Orlon acrylic, which was a wool substitute, Lycra spandex, which we all know and love, and Teflon, which is, believe it or not, a fiber. So DuPont had this family of fibers that was based on that came out of R&D, and most people recognize that DuPont was an important fiber science company, but what most people don't remember is that DuPont was also a marketing company. It was one of the great marketing companies of the post-war years. Arthur M. Sanders, a senior manager in the DuPont Fibers department, said that DuPont in the post-war years sought to, quote, transformed the relatively simple art of selling fabric into the, quote, complicated science of marketing. He said this in American Fabrics magazine in 1962. Now, in order to sell these fibers, DuPont, as I said, what became a major marketing company, and it embraced what one executive at the advertising agency BBD&O called the total marketing concept. The total marketing concept had a number of components, and one of those components was, as you can see here, direct advertising to consumers. If you pick up the Saturday Evening Post or Ladies' Home Journal or Red Book or any popular magazine from this era, you will run across tons of these advertisements related to synthetic fibers. DuPont's also, another component of this approach is market research. Now, we know about data mining today because we have computers, and every time we check out something at the supermarket, the computer registers our purchases, and somewhere, somebody is collecting data on us and figuring out what we want to buy and how to restock the store. But before the days of supercomputers, companies had ways of collecting data. They relied on simple door-to-door surveys. They relied on focus groups. And the king of focus groups was a guy named Ernest Dichter, who created the Institute for Motivational Research and was a consultant to DuPont, who helped DuPont understand the consumer. So if you go to Dichter's files, you can find tons and tons of market research reports talking about what consumers wanted in the post-war years. And one little gem that I found in going through Dichter's papers is that he actually coined the famous term peacock revolution to describe the menswear market for the 1960s in doing research for DuPont. Another individual is often credited with that discovery, that term, but it was actually Dichter working for DuPont. Another component of DuPont's total marketing concept was end-use marketing. And what do I mean by this? DuPont had to figure out how to reach the customer, and this is where Dorothy Lebus comes in. So DuPont had a long tradition of technical service, engineering technical service to its customers. It made highly sophisticated, highly technical products. And its engineers, it had teams of engineers that would go to the textile mills and that would help the textile mill engineers adjust the fibers to the machinery and the equipment and so on and so forth. But it also had, in the Empire State Building on Fifth Avenue, elaborate showrooms designed by the interior designer William Paulman. And in those showrooms, DuPont courted customers. Now, you have to remember that the Empire State Building is, if you think of the geography of New York City, it's on Fifth Avenue. It's 2 blocks away from 7th Avenue, where all the Garmentos are. All of the textile mills have offices in this stretch of land that goes from 5th Avenue to 7th Avenue, that goes up from 42nd Street down to 30th Street in New York. This is big block called the Garment District, and the Empire State Building's on the fringes of the Garment District. So DuPont occupies 2 whole floors of the Empire State Building, and these floors are dedicated to reaching out to the end-use consumers in these luxurious surroundings. One important component that one important aspect of this end-use marketing is DuPont's relationship with the haute couturiers in Paris. As part of trying to familiarize end-use customers with the new fibers, with what they can do, DuPont had a contract with the Chambre syndicale de la couture parisienne, and it worked closely with the textile mills and with the haute couturiers to integrate synthetic fibers into the haute couture collections. And here we have a very rare photograph of Givenchy visiting the Dupont Company in 1953. Now this is significant because I've had curators tell me, oh no, couturiers never use synthetic fibers, when in fact there's plenty of evidence that they use synthetic fibers, and it makes perfect sense when you think about it, because it's the post-war years. The Americans have a good reputation in Europe because of the war, and American business is quite revered, and the Dupont Company, of course, because of its French connections, its French origins, is also revered. So there is plenty of evidence to suggest that these couturiers used synthetic fibers. So similarly, while Dupont set up relationships with the couturiers, it was in that tradition that Dupont set up a relationship and a contract with Dorothy Lebus. Dorothy Lebus previously had a career in San Francisco, where her colleagues were people like Annie Albers, Paula Stout, and Marianne Stengel. She helped to pioneer a revival of craft weaving, which in part had been an expression of modernist design, but it was also a tool for designing textiles for industry. This happened before the war. After the war, she relocated to New York. Her husband was a very famous journalist. He twice won the Pulitzer Prize, once for his coverage of the Korean War, and second for his coverage of the Little Rock, Arkansas desegregation incident. She was very well connected to elite sort of intelligentsia circles, and their apartment, he had a different name. His name was Moran. Their apartment attracted a lot of influential people. She, by the late 1940s, Liebes started to turn away from craft weaving and really started to do more with designing fabrics for industry. And I see Liebes as one of many mid-century designers who helped industry get in touch with the consumer. In my first book, called Imagining Consumers, Design and Innovation from Wedgwood to Corning, I coined the term fashion intermediaries to describe people who don't necessarily have the title art director or designer, but who work with industry or within industry to help the industry figure out what consumers or what customers want. In Imagining Consumers, I talked about Frida Diamond and her work for Liebes, a mid-century female designer who helped Liebes get in touch with the mass market. And in my new book, The Color Revolution, I talk about Margaret Hayden Rourke, who was America's first professional color forecaster, and I look at her career from 1918 till 1950, her retirement in 1955. Similarly, Dorothy Lebus brought what was called the woman's viewpoint to DuPont. Now this sounds very antiquated, it sounds very sexist, but it was part of the mid-century mentality. Companies believed that in order to get in touch with what women wanted, they had to hire women to help them interpret female desires. So Liebes, like Diamond and like Margaret Hayden Rourke, brought the woman's viewpoint to design. Along these lines, she worked for the Goodall Fabrics Company in Maine, designing fabrics. She also, most famously, worked for the De Beckman Company, a Cleveland-based firm that invented Lurex. Who doesn't love sparkle? And she helped De Beckman to design this palette. These are threads from the textile collection at the National Museum of American History. She designed these palettes, and then she also would help them design the curtains and other products that could be used. Now, by about 1954, the DuPont Company got wind of what Liebes was doing. Now, DuPont was an enormous company at this time and employed more than 100,000 people. and it had specialists on staff that were dedicated to home furnishings. The person who got wind of Liebes's work was a guy named Donald Holmes. He was a home furnishing specialist working for DuPont, and in early 1955, his boss, Angie Smith, who was head of the textile department, hired Liebes. This is a DuPont publicity photo showing Liebes in her studio. Liebes later recalled the rationale for her being called on by DuPont. She said, "The raison d'etre was to get the prestige of my career behind the DuPont textile fiber story, to have me add style and tone to DuPont fibers and fabrics, and to have me recreate DuPont's image of the plain old chemist's utility, substitutes, and wearability into something really glamorous." So I'm going to show you this cute little slide. This is one of my favorite artifacts. The one reason why it's appropriate one of the many reasons why it's appropriate for me to be speaking today is because the Dorothy Lebus archives is actually housed here in this museum in the Archives of American Art. And so many of the materials that I've been using have been drawn from her business archives, which are housed here. I love this little thank you card. Obviously went with some flowers. Liebes came on board as the home furnishings advisor for DuPont in '55. She had just come back from a trade show, and the DuPont boys, self-described, thank her for doing a swell job. Now, what exactly did doing this swell job entail? DuPont, as I mentioned, had these home furnishing specialists, and Liebes worked very closely with the home furnishings specialists, which were based in Wilmington and in New York. She worked with men like Rod Blackhurst, who's shown here from a DuPont magazine, Better Living magazine clipping. She's shown here with her at her loom in New York City, weaving some sample fabrics. What she did was work closely with the men on the DuPont staff to create idea fabrics and idea designs that would then be shared, which would show the potential for these new fibers, how the new fibers could, and the new colors, because you had to have, when you had these new synthetic fibers, you had to have new dyes that went with them, how the new fibers and how the new designs of colors could be used in fabrics. And these are just some of the samples that she created. She would also create entire samples. Here's a rug sample that she created using DuPont nylon for the Bigelow Sanford Carpet Company, showing Bigelow Sanford how synthetic fibers could be used in design. So her job was to take these new fibers, and you've got to put yourself back into the period of the 1950s. People were sort of afraid of these new fibers. They didn't really know what they were. They were, these things that came from oil. And people didn't know, designers, architects, interior designers were skeptical about the new fibers. And her job, and I think being a woman has helped with this, was to soften the impact of these fibers and to try to get them to be used by textile mills and by architects and interior designers. The other aspect of her job was simply to publicize DuPont fibers. Here's an exhibit from the DuPont showroom in the Empire State Building, showing the Dorothy Lebus fibers. As you can see, it's mostly men from the home furnishings trades, architects, textile designers, and so on and so forth, coming in to look at some of her idea fabrics. This was at the Empire State Building. She also traveled around the country on behalf of DuPont. Here she is at a home furnishing show. She went to the major furniture shows, such as the Furniture Mart in Chicago. She designed interiors, such as this design for a masculine country house, which was shown in one of the newspapers. Doesn't look too masculine, looks like something from Austin Powers. But you can see she's trying to show how you could use the different colors on the stairs. You can tell it's like a sample house because the stairs are all different colors. She also went to department stores. Hudson's, it was a famous department store in Detroit during the heyday of department stores. She would go on tours and speak to groups and publicize Dupont Fibers. Here she is also on the Today Show on NBC network television, publicizing, chatting up Dupont Fibers. She also, so in summary, her job was to create idea fabrics and then to help idea fabrics. And so we have some examples of, we know that some of her designs were accepted and some of her designs were integrated into interior decoration. I'll be doing more with that on my book, but here's an interior design of the Marco Polo Club in New York, designed by Donald Deskey. It's not exactly to our taste, I agree, but the fabrics, the red fabrics that you see installed are actually Dorothy Lebus designs. And on the opposite side, you can see the idea fabric that she developed for Donald Deskey to put in the Marco Polo Club at the Waldorf Astoria. She also designed fabrics that became ubiquitous. Does anybody recognize this? Yes. You own that scarf. Well, it was, the scarf must have been based on Dorothy Lebus's designs for American Airlines. This is American Airlines upholstery from 1970. Donald Deskey, Henry Dreyfuss, redid the interiors of the American Airlines 747 jets in 1970, and these were her fabric designs, which are kind of fun. So in summary, what does this case of Dorothy Lebus and DuPont tell us? Well, I think that it suggests that the corporate world and the craft world, which are sometimes assumed to be polar opposites, were in fact linked in the post-war era. If you think about what Liebes did, of how she worked in a small studio, she had a small staff, she used the handcrafted loom to create these idea fabrics. Is her work really any different than that of the bench chemist laboring at the Wilmington R&D facility of the DuPont company? Is it really any different than that of the chemical engineer who has to be familiar with a design process of a different type in order to create the large reactors that make the production of DuPont fibers possible? So, was DuPont, in fact, already familiar with craft processes through the bench chemist? And is that why the company, in part, turned to Dorothy Lebus? How can this history be helpful to us today? I think as companies strive to make designs for the 21st century, as we try to figure out what it is we're going to make, perhaps we can call on a new generation of craft practitioners who can bring new 21st century perspectives to innovation. In the Under 40 label, we learned that many young practitioners understood that process is more important than the thing. Moving forward, perhaps we'll see the National Museum of American Art and the Renwick Gallery help us bring craft and industry back together. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie, also for giving me no small task for the future. Closer to our hearts than you may think. Sandra, I've been waiting so long to hear about your last trip to Disney World, and now you get to share it with everyone. So please join us. Sandra Alfoldy from NSCAD University in Halifax.
I am so happy to be here. We were stuck overnight in St. John, New Brunswick on our way down. So it's a great joy to be here. And I'm sorry, Nicholas and Katie, a little plug. We're just launching the Craft and Popular Culture Initiative. I've left some postcards out front, and Disney naturally fits into that category. So thanks to Nicholas and Katie for a great conference. Yes? That's what your initiative is. This is a research initiative funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. And the goal of Craft and Popular Culture is to discuss popular culture as an umbrella that links together studio craft, professional fine craft, DIY movement, hobby craft, all the things we've been talking about. Thank you for asking. So craft plays a vital role in the Disney brand. This market-driven global media oligopoly earned annual revenues of $38 billion in 2010 through corporate holdings that include everything from theme parks and cruise ships to television networks and music labels. What sells the Disney brand is the idea of imagined perfection. The ideal family. Tom Cruise took his daughter Suri to Disney World for some photo ops during his recent divorce. Oh. That didn't sound good. Thank you. And as Nicholas mentioned, we took our children there to bond. This is our son Nicholas, very excited with the giant gingerbread tree. A romanticized utopian image of what the world could be and the ideal country. Craft is a vital force in translating these morals to Disney consumers. This paper will argue that the crafts are not incidental to the Disney success story, but rather they remain at the core of Walt Disney's vision of quality and family values. There are simply too many examples of Walt Disney's craft initiatives to fit into this paper, which will instead focus on three themes in the Disney craft story. First, craft as quality. Second, the stereotypes of craft embodied in Disney films. And third, the use of craft as entertainment. The connection between the Disney Empire and crafts has its roots in Walt Disney's own fascination with miniature railroad building. Before discussing this hobby craft, it's important to provide some context for Walt Disney. And here he is showing in the statue at Disneyland with his most famous creation, Mickey Mouse. Walter Elias Disney was born in Chicago, Illinois in 1901 and moved with his family to a farm in Marceline, Missouri at age 4. This town was the crossroads for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railways and contributed to Disney's love of trains. The Walt Disney Company was started in 1923 in Los Angeles, and in 1928 Mickey Mouse was born in the movie Steamboat Willie. In 1937, the first full-length animated movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, was produced. And Disney started talking about the idea of building a theme park as early as the 1920s. It was finally in 1955 that this dream was realized with the opening of Disneyland in Anaheim, California. It is impossible to read this theme park, Walt Disney and his corporation, as apolitical. After all, wars and military involvement shaped Disney's political consciousness, and through his early movies influenced millions of children weaned on Disney. There's some disturbing information on Walt Disney's personal politics, from his serving as J. Edgar Hoover's domestic spy, reporting on red movements in the movie industry, and through his testimony to the House of Un-American Activities Committee, to his creation of the movie The Three Caballeros, created for Nelson Rockefeller's Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs. And today, you ride through the Three Caballeros at the Epcot Mexican Pavilion, and here's my son with Donald Duck as a caballero. However, these politics are rarely mentioned, replaced instead by Disney's public self-projection as, quote, a simple, down-on-the-farm, Midwestern, commonsensical, and Yankee know-how kind of fellow who had nothing to do with deeper intellectual sensibilities or political agenda, an attitude that was well represented through his miniature railroad building. And this is from this fantastic blog called the Diz Forum, DIS Online. And this is an entry on Walt's Barn, a train lover's dream. Disney loved building railroads so much that he turned the backyard of his Los Angeles home into a giant playground for his craft, which he named the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad. With his hands, he built little freight cars, one passenger to a car, and a caboose, fitted out with miniature books and newspapers fitted to scale in a trackside workshop that was a precise replica of the barn on his 48-acre boyhood farm in Missouri. He was famous for his perfectionism, which was reflected in his detailed railroads. When he set about building his Burbank, California studio, he was personally involved in all aspects of design, from the layout of the buildings to the design of the animators' chairs. Nothing was left to chance. Publicly, Disney described his hands-on approach as reflecting a concern with quality. He infused all his endeavors with the sense of good craftsmanship, leaving consumers with the impression that they were enjoying a well-crafted entertainment from a man and a company who really cared. Although Walt Disney died in 1966, Disney Imagineering, the group which oversees the master planning, creative development, design, engineering, production, project management, research, and development for Walt Disney Company and its affiliates, continues his emphasis on craft as quality. Disney Imagineering's motto is "Value makes our brand stand out," and excellent craftsmanship in support of exciting designs is at the forefront of this idea of value, as is the romantic notion of the hard-working, ethical craftsperson. The Walt Disney Company uses Disney's reputation for value and quality to promote the idea that they are seeking excellence in creative talent, not just profit-making ability. The blog Reimagineering features a picture of Disney and the quote, "Disneyland is a work of love. We didn't go into Disneyland just with the idea of making money." The construction of Disneyland Park relied on Disney and his team using their careful eye for detail to create the dream of a magical park. Even today, visitors to one of the 11 Disney theme parks in the world will note that this careful attention to detail creates the impression of care and high quality. Various crafts are on display to reinforce this idea, from the glass-blowing shop Crystal Arts on Main Street, USA in Disney World, Florida, where the Caramel Couch, the Caramel House at the German Pavilion at Epcot is also located. You can see my children like that one. To the window dedicated to Harriet Burns, the first female Disney Imagineer hired in 1955 along Disney's Main Street, USA, which states "The Artisan's Loft, Handmade Miniatures," in tribute to her work on the 1964 World's Fair Disney ride, It's a Small World, which I won't sing to you today because then you'll never forgive me, among other projects. Burns was also responsible for designing various lands at Disneyland, which communicate their identities through handcrafted elements, from the cigar store Indians along Main Street, USA, and there's just not time today to get into the problems around that, to the Polynesian-style carvings at the Tiki Room. Craft is also a key component in distinguishing Disney's top-end products. Nowhere is this more evident than at Disney's Grand Californian Hotel in Anaheim, California, opened in 2001 with a 4-diamond hotel rating and almost 1,000 rooms. Peter Dominic of 4240 Architecture Incorporated was the designer, and he drew upon California arts and crafts examples to create a hybrid. And by the way, this is again from the Diz Forum, where there are thousands of pictures of this hotel. They love it. The Grand Californian Hotel features extended roof lines, projecting beams, and wood shingles, and the pool area replicates Charles and Henry Green's 1908 Gamble House backyard with generous amounts of arroyo stone, clinker bricks, and trellis work with exaggerated interlocking joinery. According to the Disney website, standard guest rooms feature, quote, "remarkable American craftsman-style architecture and decor," while those with more refined tastes and larger wallets might prefer the artisan suites or the signature suites. This is the Arcadia suite, which offer a beautiful architectural style a la Frank Lloyd Wright and Charles and Henry Green. The hotel offers an Art of the Craft tour, which provides a very brief introduction to the ideals of William Morris and John Ruskin. Featured on the tour is the California Boardroom, inspired by the children's playroom built by Frank Lloyd Wright in his Oak Park estate in 1895, which employs Disney's interpretation of Wright's barrel-vaulted ceiling, giant wood beams, light fixtures, and stained glass clear-story windows. The Grand California Hotel is unique in that it pays tribute to local California craft traditions, unlike Disney's other projects, which focus on Disney's very globalized crafted magic. However, it reinforces the brand's emphasis on craft as quality. The hotel relies on providing the public with easily interpreted symbols of the American arts and crafts style, and it succeeds in this because no one creates stereotypes better than Disney. Over 200 million people a year watch a Disney film or home video. Academics argue that this experience can help forge individual and collective identities, and by extension, I would like to argue that this includes shaping the general public's perception of craft. There are specific codes of craft contained in Disney films. In the 1940 animated film Pinocchio, Jiminy Cricket opens the film singing "When You Wish Upon a Star," or as my students are saying since they took over the George Lucas studios, "When You Wish Upon a Dark Star," which is paralleled by the idea that the imagination and power of craft can turn dreams into reality. Woodcarver Geppetto is depicted in a warm, cozy woodshop with easily imported European sensibilities and craft traditions. The 1950 movie Cinderella, shown here with my son Nicholas and our friend Emma, features the beautiful Cinderella who is forced to sew her own gown for the ball, but her evil stepmother and wicked stepsisters give her too much work in order to prevent her from completing the project. In the midst of Cinderella's domestic drudgery, sewing this gown represents a grander vision of things through the promise of fashion and beauty. Adorable little mice help her with the sewing while cheerfully singing, "We can do it, we can do it, we can do it," reinforcing the virtues of industriousness and tenaciousness, while the fairy godmother comes along to complete Cinderella's fashion transformation through glass slippers, a reinvented gown, good hair, and even a carriage. Cinderella's beauty is enriched through her virtuous work ethic. European studies scholar Jack Zipes argues that Disney's interpretation of fairy tales shapes and standardizes our notions of happiness and utopia, which continue to be filtered through a Disney lens, even if it's become slightly myopic. As thousands of little girls parade through Disney World in their standardized Cinderella dresses, one can only wonder if they are associating their costumes with a hard-working craft ethic. The craft references contained in Disney films fall into two camps. First, the utopian possibilities of a better world, as seen in Geppetto lovingly creating Pinocchio and Cinderella and her mice sewing hope into her ball gown. And second, dangerous female enterprises. In the 1959 film Sleeping Beauty, Disney's 16th animated feature, Princess Aurora is cursed by the evil witch Maleficent to die when she touches the spindle of a spinning wheel before the sun sets on her 16th birthday. And here's Maleficent and the spinning wheel from the candy shop at Hollywood Studios. Here the spinning wheel operates as a symbol of the medieval setting of the film and feeds into the gendered expectations of the princess, who of course can only be awakened by her true love's kiss. In Zipes' analysis of Disney fairy tale films, he stresses that their formula works by providing a utopian vision of the standardized world, expressed through aestheticized social and political relations. Even though Sleeping Beauty has been harmed by a spinning wheel and lies in a coma for years, she is as beautiful and youthful as ever when her prince finally arrives. The film contains the three female tropes employed in almost every Disney feature: the idealized teenage heroine, the wicked middle-aged beauty, and the nurturing post-menopausal woman. Each of these groups reacts to the symbols of crafting in predetermined ways. The teenager, by naively embracing it; the wicked one, by manipulating it into evil; and the post-menopausal woman, by correcting the evil manipulations with magical solutions. At first glance, the recent Disney film Tangled from 2010 appears to deconstruct these stereotypes by introducing a strong female protagonist who takes a different approach to craft. This, Disney's 50th animated film, is based on the story of Rapunzel, locked away in a tower, who is forced to use her hair for escape. In the "When Will My Life Begin?", one of the many songs in the film, strewn along the plot to enliven and brighten the action, which features a montage of Rapunzel passing time in her tower, she is shown undertaking various crafts with the lyrics, "I'll play guitar and knit and cook and basically just wonder, when will my life begin? Pottery and ventriloquy and candle making, and I'll keep wondering, when will my life begin?" 60 years after Cinderella sings of the hopefulness of craft, Tangled dismisses it as part of her captivity. Further inverting the gendered expectations of craft, Tangled features a scene in the Snuggly Duckling pub. where mean Viking warriors come to life dancing and singing the song, I've Got a Dream. This song features the Vikings vamping it up to the lyrics, I'm malicious, mean, and scary. My sneer could curdle dairy. But Cullen wants to be a florist. Gunther does interior design. Olaf's into mime. Attila's cupcakes are divine. And Bruiser knits killer socks. And this is Bruiser knitting the socks. Images of these brutes knitting and baking are guaranteed to elicit laughter from audiences. But do they overcome the gendered stereotypes of craft that are essential to the Disney story? The use of comedy is simply a tool to distract viewers from the serious nature of the story, and the laughs are possible only because everyone knows his or her role in relation to craft. Tangled is paying lip service to the changing social and cultural values while staying with the ethics, ideologies, and work practices established at the start of the Disney studios. And the crafts are a fundamental part of this formula. In our globalized world, Disney still promises a better life built on the American ideal. This is simply part of the diversion and entertainment that the public expects from their interactions with Disney. Not only are the crafts fundamental to selling the Disney brand through their associations with quality and easily read gendered stereotypes, they are good fun. Early on, Walt Disney calculated that fun was essential to all his enterprises, and he brought his enjoyment of miniature railroad building directly into his theme parks through the steam trains that bring visitors around the parks. The Wilderness Lodge in Florida features the Carrollwood Pacific Railroad Room, which celebrates the original hobby craft that inspired Disney, and is decorated in an interpretation of the American arts and crafts style with thick oak furnishings, dramatic granite columns. The use of craft can be subtle in Disney theme parks and on the Disney cruise ships, relying on visions of craftspeople as entertainment value. For example, the individually hand-carved and consistently repainted horses on the King Arthur Carousel at Disney World and Disneyland, which have their brass polished every night, or the exquisite mosaic murals inside the castle passages into Disney World's Cinderella Castle. Walt Disney insisted that everything in the theme parks be designed from the perspective of children, and he employed forced perspective to accomplish his dramatic lands. When he hired the Imagineer Dorothy Redmond to design the 5 mosaic murals inside Cinderella's castle, which opened in 1971, he expected a similar level of drama. Each panel is 15 by 10 feet, with over 300,000 pieces of Italian glass and rough smalty, crafted and set by a team of 6 artists overseen by the mosaicist Hans Joachim Scharf. With more than 500 colors and specialty tiles using sterling silver and 14-karat gold, these mosaics are powerful enough to stop huge crowds, making it difficult to pass easily through the castle's passageway and really hard to photograph them. The success of these mosaics have inspired others, including a Beauty and the Beast's Enchanted Rose mosaic in the Be Our Guest restaurant in the new Fantasyland at Disney World, which distinctly resembles a Charles Rennie Mackintosh Glasgow-style rose, and numerous mosaics on the Disney Fantasy and Disney Dream cruise ships. The mosaics are so popular on the cruise ships that an internet search offered up over 125,000 hits, with people writing of the Disney artistry in the Cinderella ballroom dance with Prince Charming mosaic in the Royal Palace restaurant, and a huge mosaic of a bullfighter in a bathroom in the Europa area of the Disney Fantasy ship. I'm sorry, I just think that would be a lot of fun. Excuse me, I'm just going to go to the washroom. The first Disney cruise ships, the Wonder and the Magic, used the wow factor of glass with dramatic chandeliers in the lobby. Both ships feature enormous Dale Chihuly chandeliers. I'm sorry about the bad photography. With the one on the Wonder being described by blogger Scott Sanders as designed to, quote, complement the Wonder's Art Nouveau design. The chandelier features open, freeform shaped drops from the ceiling along an elaborate metal armature that welcomes each passenger on the ship as they pass through the main atrium lobby on Deck 3 during embarkation. I feel bad for the crew members who are tasked with the job to dust this amazing work of art. And if you look down below, you can see the Art Nouveau theme running through the carpet in the lobby. Chihuly's ability to impress through the excesses of glass is comparable to the dazzle of the Disney cruise ships. In this case, craft is symbolic of the visitor's magical entry into a luxurious utopia. Throughout the Disney Wonder are Disneyfied interpretations of the arts and crafts movement, with images like William Morris's woodpecker tapestry, reimagined here with parrots, and I do believe it's plenty of sunshine headed my way. And Art Nouveau images like the Sarah Bernhardt posters by Alphonse Mucha, this time featuring some of the Disney cast of characters like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. These important symbols in the aesthetic and conceptual history of studio craft are rendered devoid of meaning, but highly entertaining. As the continuing success of the Disney brand attests, the attention to the detail of craft and the message of quality can also translate into entertaining spectacle. Disney's goal is not to create conceptual statements about the condition and future of contemporary craft, and this is irrelevant in terms of the company's bottom line. The Disneyfication of craft means the Disney stereotypes of craft as gender-specific, containing American morals and values, and entertaining through their adherence to high quality will continue to exude great power over the popular culture appeal of craft. There's no end in sight as the new Disney cruise ships, theme parks, hotels, and films increasingly employ craft references. It is incumbent upon craft historians, curators, craftspeople to critically assess how this impacts upon the general public's idea of professional fine craft. Have the crafts been Disneyfied to the point where they're simply part of the visual pleasure spectacle, thus rendered devoid of concept? Has Walt Disney's vision of an American utopia created a craft dystopia? Thank you very much.
We're ready.
They're not.
They're not.
Maybe if we sang.
I can't sing. Well, maybe everybody is tired because it's Friday afternoon.
Day 2. Oh.
Yes.
It's not a question, but it's a comment that you made a lot of things make sense to me about Dupont. My grandfather worked on nylon and Hemlock.
Great.
He also probably died of mesothelioma or something.
Yeah.
But to see all of those things put to good use and good design and interesting marketing, it was just fascinating.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of there's a really good design history of Dupont that I'm working on pulling together. It's an exciting project, and I am aware of the issues with the toxic products, and so for my book on synthetic fibers, that's going to be one of the challenges, is how to deal with some of those issues that you brought up.
Regina, I'm interested in your take, if you study innovation,
Uh-huh.
On your take on what Disney is doing with craft and how that relates to innovation. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well,
Kate was just wondering if Regina has any comments on Disney's innovation and this notion of innovation in craft.
Well, actually, it's a strange thing. I was reminded actually of Ulysses' talk yesterday, where he showed how at the turn of the century the neoclassical style, the American that was recreated into an American Renaissance style, and so I was reminded saw echoes of that process in Disney's use of these ancient of these older motifs. I've never been to Disneyland. I'm probably the only person on the planet who's never been. So,
Yeah, that's right. My parents refused to go. That's why I'm studying it.
so I saw echoes of that phenomenon that we saw yesterday.
I'm Rebecca Stevens, curator at the Textile Museum, and my question is, do you have any research to support why DuPont selected Dorothy Lebus above other relatively well-known textile designers of the time?
I don't have any evidence about that. She was fairly well known. She was based in New York, which some of the other people whose names I listed were still based in California. I think that she was, as I mentioned, her husband was fairly well known. He had just won one of his Pulitzer Prizes already. So I'm wondering if that, in fact, had something to do with it. But it's an interesting question, and I will keep my eye open for some illuminating, to see if I can find illuminating materials on that. Why Liebes? I think it was because she was she was probably most visible and available in New York, but I'm making an assumption there.
It could have been the Lurex.
It could have been the Lurex because
Sparkle is always good, as you said.
yeah, she had worked with synthetic materials before, right? And you know more than I do about some of these other people and whether or not they worked with synthetic fibers. I think that they were all experimenting with, many of them were experimenting with synthetic fibers, but she already had the experience. She also had worked for some of the auto companies and had used DuPont, and had used synthetic fibers designing upholstery for some of the auto companies in the late 40s already. So she had, in addition to de Beckman, she had for some of the textile manufacturers for the auto companies, she had done that work. So she may have been more familiar with DuPont products more than anybody, and with Lurex products more than anybody.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you could comment on the globalization or global character of Disney's particular brand image, and not just as regards to craft, but also sort of how that impacts the image of America and the North American continent, really.
That's a good question. You know, I wish, sadly, that I'd been to all 11 of the parks around the world. I haven't, but I was in France at Euro Disney when that opened, and I remember being overwhelmed. I think I was there in 1994, and when you go there, I don't know if it's still the same, you go to Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and you dress up as one of 4 Indian tribes, Native Indian tribes, which was problematic, and then you have to chant and holler and hoot. And so what was on display were indigenous craft traditions as you walked into Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, and then you were met with these stereotypes. So, you know, in terms of a globalized perception, it really is fascinating how there's this embrace of this romantic idea of what America is that really is projected through the Disney brand. And I think what gives people such comfort from it and is that no matter where you go in the world, you can get the Mickey Mouse ice cream sandwich. So that notion of the globalized world, which is so threatening, is suddenly made fun, entertaining, and comforting. So yeah.
Yeah, you see some of that. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking that putting the synthetic fibers in the haute couture fashions also has some of that same quality, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I would love to see sort of a historical record of Disney's decision-making along these lines, just sort of like the way that Reggie has just looked at DuPont. I'm wondering if you have any sense of how decision-making is conducted around some of these craft infiltrations into Disney's universe. I mean, who's making these decisions about the hotel? Who's deciding that the cruise ships will have these highlights? Mm-hmm. It seems, I mean, I never thought about it, of course, until today, but through your eyes, it seems actually like it's quite consistent.
Yeah, well, thank you. You know, this is a really interesting area for me to be researching in. My mother-in-law, who's an art historian, once told me only research dead people, and I'm not. And what I'm finding is that it's a corporation with a distinctive brand, so getting inside to find the answers to those questions is really a daunting process. What I'm able to piece together, and I'm going to California in January in the hopes that I finally got some access to some archival material, is that Disney himself really loved miniature railway building, and in that there was this, even though I don't know, I want to see if he's written this down, you know, what he felt about it. But the people who are taking care of his miniature railway today, I mean, there's a group of people, dedicated volunteers, who carefully have recreated the little trackside barn where he built these things. And they keep the equipment there, and they keep the trains there. And to them, it's that craftsmanship and care and quality. So, you know, Nicholas, I don't know about the exact decision-making. It's all done through Disney Imagineering, which is a very tightly controlled network. So
But you think it's all internal? You don't think they're bringing in arts and crafts consultants?
As far as I can, just in the early stages of research, yeah, no, sadly, I don't think that there's a lot of money to be an arts and crafts consultant for Disney. I think that, and Wouldn't that be
those of
nice?
us looking
I
for
think that
careers.
it's an internal mechanism through Disney Imagineering. And yet, what's been so exciting to me in the research is there is this consistent referencing to historical arts and crafts moments and styles and people. So either there's one individual who's very influential within Imagineering, or it's just feeds back into an overall concept of craft as quality and care. So yes, no, I'm going to California. I'll see how far I get finding the answer to
Very
that.
interesting. That would be very interesting.
You said that it was Peter Dominic was the architect. You know, I think that one of his work was in Denver, so I have a feeling that, and I think they exclusively did these kinds of
Yeah.
buildings, so.
And yeah, no, thank you, Elisa. It's true. Dominic Incorporated is in Denver, and I've got to follow through. It was very heartbreaking. I phoned there this fall, and he's passed away himself. But yeah, the firm does have the materials, so I might have to come and see you. Well, you're nearby.
There's also a very interesting history of Disney's own education through. He was an alumnus of the Chenard Art Institute, which was founded by a woman named Nelberg. Eventually goes on to help fund what becomes CalArts. So there's a really interesting pedagogical history that I hope you don't leave out of this research.
Well, no, thanks, Jenny. Absolutely. That was the problem. The paper was, I had to fit all in, but no, absolutely. And not only that, but Disney Imagineering still holds educational contests. There's a Disney University, and they're still hiring young designers and they have contests for young designers. And that Jenny's point brings me to another one that, really, Disney was very aware of using female Imagineers. So he had women doing designs, and it goes back to what you were talking about with Dorothy Lebus. I mean, this was about getting a female design sensibility into these major buildings. And again, I need to do more research into whether or not there's something in the archive about that link to craft.
Janine Foligno here. Wonderful lectures by both of you. It's been a wonderful, wonderful day altogether. I am wearing my Lurex outfit here, courtesy of Eileen Fisher. But a question I had for Reggie has to do with the concept of the designer craftsman, which was so prevalent at the time that Liebes made her move to Dupont. And there were a number of artists who did have an alliance with industry. Jack Pripp for Reed and Barton is one, and Nakashima Design for I forget whom. But there are relationships that existed. But I think that the one that Liebes had with Dupont may be the most successful one that I'm aware of. And yet she had her little yarn shop in San Francisco, and she made this really remarkable transformation, going on to work on the 39 World's Fair. She made this transformation. She really didn't seem to go back to her individual weaving roots, and maybe that's the secret of her success. I think most of them tended to go back to academia or something, but perhaps you could give us more enlightenment on that.
I think she was a really astute businesswoman. For example, I'm fascinated by the fact that many of the images that you see of her studio, which are often DuPont publicity photos and clearly posed, show her and capitalize on this idea of hand craftsmanship, right? She's always shown at the loom with yarn of some sort. And then there's also this uniform that her staff wears, and it's these silk Chinese jackets. And it's really a consistent motif that you see. So I use that example to make the suggestion that I think that she was really good at branding herself, and that she really was perhaps just more savvy as a businesswoman. And I think that aspect needs to be explored more in some way, and whether or not I do that in the book or in a different article, I think is important. But I do think that she was more successful. I did try to follow up when I did the original research on Liebes. I did try to compare her to some other of her contemporaries. I think Marianne Stengel, there are some papers, but the papers were not as rich. The Liebes papers are especially rich for someone interested in the business story. So in part, you know, I think she was most successful, but we're able to get access to her story because the papers are there, and the papers really can be. I've mined them a little bit and hope to mine them some more. I'm going to compare her, I think, in the book to Bill Pullman, who was an interior decorator, a corporate interior decorator. He did those Dupont, the Dupont showroom, those 3 beautiful color images of the interior of the Empire State Building. He did those. He was a prominent interior decorator of the post-war years who did a lot of corporate commissions. He's been largely forgotten, even though he did publish several books and was quite prominent in this period. So I hope to compare her to him, I think, would be kind of a fun and useful comparison. Male, female, interior decorator, weaver, so on and so forth. So maybe some illumination will come out of that comparison.
I was going to call a break, but I'm so delighted that Elizabeth Agler is here from Philadelphia that you can have one last question.
Well, thanks, Nicholas. I appreciate that. I have to stand on my tippy toes. I just wanted to ride on Janine's comment that, in a way, the designer craftsman area of our field is really underserved, and it reminds me of a very an artist lost in time, Petrus Vasquez, a ceramic artist from Philadelphia, who taught at what's now University of the Arts, but Pennsylvania College of Art, who straddled between clay and industrial design, but who wound up making, and we have 2 examples of his work in the museum, gladly, but again, not much about this man out there, but it turns out when you do look up what he's done, he's most known for creating breast prostheses and the like. And so again, you know, what part of industry that was that, and then of course the medical community as well. I think that there are probably many artists from that period who self-identified proudly as designer craftsmen, and one that's a label that again is should be continue. I mean, it's an awkward label. I mean, because it's 2 words put together, and we're struggling with craft, and we're struggling with all these things, aren't we? But nonetheless, it's a huge part of the story. And I encourage anyone in graduate school, it's a huge area for thesis work, and so carry on.
I agree. I think that what's really marvelous about this conference, as I mentioned to Nicholas earlier, was the fact that there are so many different people here bringing so many diverse perspectives. It's really been a pleasure to hear about how other types of scholars are approaching craft. I know that a lot of people think, ew, business history, ew. But I hope that I've shown you that business history can actually be very exciting and very illuminating, and that perhaps you'll take it more seriously or see its value in the future.
All right, thank you.